Hey everyone, welcome back. This is going to be a fun episode. We're talking about all things baby feeding, and I have the pleasure of talking with a registered dietitian who actually is in PA school just up the road where I went to medical school at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and we're going to be talking about baby-led weaning today. My guest is Caroline Weeks, and she is active on social media at the Clinic Dietitian, and she teaches parents and families all about healthy eating and eating choices and everything like that. And I'm really excited to get to talk about baby-led weaning because as a pediatrician, I hear lots of families that are confused about where to start with feeding and how to start feeding. And in the past 2 to 5 years, I've noticed a widening chasm between the kind of standard purees, rice cereal, starter people, and the baby-led weaning people. And I kind of tend to be one that kind of tries to bridge the gap and say, like, just feed the baby. But there's a lot to unpack with what baby-led weaning is and isn't. So maybe could you start, Caroline, and just kind of introduce us to the concept of baby-led weaning for everybody to be on the same page when we're talking about that?
Of course. And first of all, thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to finally be able to talk to you. We've kept in touch via Instagram. I love the fact that Instagram connects medical providers and professionals all over the country. But I thought it was so funny when I realized you were just down the street, like you said, from me. So baby-led weaning, I think in a nutshell, it's such a ever popular concept, though the concept itself, baby-led weaning, was coined, many, many years ago. It's nothing new. I always like to tell people, especially in other countries other than the US, it's really just feeding your baby. So it's nothing really special by any means, but I think media has kind of taken it by storm, and a lot of parents, as you said, are questioning it and wanting to give it a try, hearing some of the research. There's minimal research around it, but essentially what it is style of introducing first complementary foods that sort of quote unquote skips over the purees, and instead it's a method where you serve your child, your infant, whole foods. And when I say whole, I mean literally whole pieces that are not pureed, and sort of let the baby take the lead, if you will. That's very much the concept, is letting your infant self-feed as opposed to the caregiver spoon feeding them. They're very much in an autonomous role with feeding. And some of the documented research has shown that it helps with kind of foster oral motor developmental skills and things like that. It can sometimes help expose babies to a variety of different textures. And I don't know if you have certain children in your clinic that kind of deal with some sensory issues or sensory aversions, but that is one of the ideas behind baby-led weaning, is that we can perhaps avoid some of those issues later down the road by introducing these wide variety of foods from the get-go. And I think one of the beauties of baby-led weaning is there's greater emphasis on early allergen introduction, which we know the new guidelines emphasize a great deal as an important concept, and a way sometimes that you can get greater variety, I think, of foods for your little one. So I'm a fan, but also as a pediatric registered dietitian who's worked in clinical practice, and like you, fed is best. It's not going to work for every family. So it's really just knowing what it is, how to go about it, and then deciding if it's best for you.
I think one of the things that parents often worry about with when they hear that concept is the choking and the gagging. I mean, I think that's probably the most common thing that parents worry about. And so how in the baby-led weaning world is that approached in terms of, okay, I'm going to cut up, an omelet into little slices or little like lines or slices or whatnot and give it to my baby, or an avocado or a banana or something along those lines, and my baby's going to choke and gag on it. Like what is the reaction from a baby-led weaning perspective to that?
Right. That's, as you mentioned, every caregiver, every parent's greatest concern is choking. And what I try to remind parents is that, gagging is a normal response. It's something we actually want to have happen because it's a safety reflex. But choking is very rare, and it really boils down to how we're preparing and serving the foods and making sure that we're choosing developmentally safe and appropriate textures, shapes, sizes, etc. A baby's trachea, as you know, is only so small that, you've got to be really mindful of how the food is presented. So definitely certain textures and shapes we want to avoid, and that's something I try to educate my families on a great deal. But I think if you're focusing on serving really moist, soft foods, your baby can kind of gum those down and kind of swallow without any issue. But yes, there are certain textures we want to be mindful of, and speech language pathologists, OTs would all agree, I think, that there are pros and cons to how you serve things for sure from a safety standpoint.
It seems like, at least in the pictures that I see, like on Instagram from people that are posting about baby-led weaning, that the sizes that you're serving are quite big, which to me makes it seem safer in terms of the baby will gum it into smaller bites before swallowing. Is that a good perspective to have on it, or a good take on the images that you see?
Definitely. First of all, we have to acknowledge, is your baby ready for solids at all? And that's
Sure.
first and foremost. I think sometimes parents, even in the most rudimentary form, they are maybe not even sure if their baby's ready, because sometimes it's super obvious for some children, and then others it's a little, let's touch and go and see. You might give it a couple weeks before. And then of course, if your child has any certain, conditions, or depending on what their birth history is, were they born early, were they not, that's going to affect the bigger picture of whether or not they're ready. So I'm sure that is something that you talk about in your well child exams all the time, and what are those signs that you look for, those signs of readiness. But that's a huge foundation that we want to have there, and really, really in solid form. In some instances, when babies are not quite there due to, say, dystonia or something like that, I might recommend that the parent does start out with some purees and then maybe move into a more baby-led approach as they get, more developmentally solid. But yes, in terms of size, I think it's kind of counterintuitive, but actually bigger is safer in many, many cases, especially when it comes to those trickier textures like meat, or what else can I think of? Meat's a big one, because meat is not only, I think, the toughest one for a parent to wrap their head around. They think, oh my goodness, how are they going to handle this? But nutritionally, it's really one of the most important, because it is so iron rich, zinc rich, which the most updated dietary guidelines now include as such key important nutrients for our infants to get from an early age. But at that 6-ish month mark, when a baby's ready, and I say ish because everybody's different, we usually kind of see this palmar grasp, right, where they don't have the refined pincer yet, and so they're gonna be able to rake that up and sort of grab it in their hand in a crude way as such. And so cutting things in, say, I like to say about the length of your 2 fingers, like so, and about the width of it. But when in doubt, go big when it comes to fruits, when it comes to wedges of vegetables like soft cooked potato or something like that. And yes, your baby will be able to kind of gum and gnaw it, and they're not maybe gonna be able to grab the whole piece at once. It might crumble off and fall. That's okay. It's about just kind of going slow and really watching and observing their every move. Of course, feeding has to be supervised, right? It's not, I think a lot of parents say, oh, baby-led weaning, great, I can go do the dishes while the child eats. I can just let them go on their own. It's baby-led.
Here, you feed yourself.
You feed yourself. Not quite. We want to still have our caregivers be very actively involved with the process. I love it when both, if both parents are in the picture, to have both their grandparents, aunts, uncles, other children with them. I think the more the merrier. But Um, but yes, there are little nuances to it for sure, but that's generally where we go. And then you mentioned, starting big with sizes. Then once your baby does start to show that pincer grasp where they are kind of advancing their fine motor skills, then we can start kind of sizing down in terms of pieces of food. But we still want it to be soft, tender, moist, so that there is no choking risk there.
Now, on the flip side, some are worried about the choking. Some are then worried on the other side about some programs that seem on the rigid side of, on day 74, you have to eat star fruit. Well, we don't even have star fruit. Like, where are we going to get that? Maybe Whole Foods.
I was going to say, I don't think I've even had that.
Right, me neither. What I often try and encourage parents to do is keep it simple and straightforward. And I think, the baby-led weaning approach makes sense to me from an evolutionary standpoint of back in the day, like, 10,000 years ago, you ate what was available. And it wasn't like, okay, on day 74, we have to eat star fruit. Well, we live in somewhere that doesn't have star fruit. Like, how do we do that? I just try and encourage parents to keep it straightforward and simple by feeding a variety of foods, yes, feeding a variety of textures and flavors, and giving multiple opportunities to try different foods and see what baby likes and what baby doesn't care for at the moment.
Amen to that. I agree 100%. I love that we're on the same page there. And I think, the millennial parent is growing up in such a generation that's so clouded by media and all this, comparison game. And I think, every parent thinks, gosh, I'm not doing enough. They always feel that way. And especially with food, I always say food is a great equalizer. Everybody eats, everybody has hopefully access to some kind of food. And that's really the key is what do you have in your pantry? I did have a baby-led weaning academy that I conducted virtually over the pandemic. And I would always start at square one with parents, and we would work together to kind of craft meal ideas. And I would say, tell me what's in your pantry. Let's just physically walk the computer over to the pantry or the laptop or phone or whatever, and let's see what you got. And we started there. And I think that when you just kind of look at what's in your fridge or pantry or cupboard in the moment, guarantee there's something that you can make work for your child. And so, yes, you don't have to feel like you've got to do the 100 foods before first year type challenges like you see out there. Sure, that's all well and good. If you get joy from that, great. It's probably fun. But I don't want parents to feel pressure that that's the only way or the right way, or that's the only way that their baby will get optimal nutrition, because it's just not true. So, babies, in terms of their complementary foods and nutrition, yes, it's a major part to get adequate nutrition, to get those vitamins, nutrients that we need. But remember that formula, breast milk, whatever you're choosing to feed is still the majority of the baby's diet and nutrition. And so really food is kind of that extra little bit on top, and it's a lot of it for those sensory skills and the developmental skills that we're focusing on with fine motor progress and things. But in terms of, we could talk all day about, how many meals at what month, and I guess I don't want to get too granular there, but if you give your baby a feeding opportunity with at least one type of food on the plate and give it frequent opportunities, as you said, making sure that, you aren't choosing maybe the same food every time, for example, rice cereal every single meal, right? That's sort of traditionally what we maybe have heard of in the past, but what we're trying to get away from as nutrition professionals in the medical space. Your baby will get adequate nutrition. So not to worry by any means.
Let's talk more about rice cereal, since we brought that up, because there has been kind of a change. In the past, it was always, you start your baby at 4 to 6 months on rice cereal, mix it with formula, mix it with breast milk, wait. Why has rice cereal fallen out of favor of recent?
Yes, I think it's taken it's ebbed and flowed in terms of history, looking at the historical timeline of baby food. And dare I mention a brand name, but Gerber, right, took the industry by storm. And it's interesting, if you follow the timeline, the time at which it was recommended that babies introduce foods, at once was not as early as it was. Some babies were getting foods at, say, 2 months, which is
Right.
just not developmentally appropriate at all. So rice cereal has unfortunately gotten a bad rap in the media as of late. There was I don't even know what news station published it, but it really scared parents, and there was a lot of miscommunication, unfortunately, in the midst of the global pandemic where people already had way too much on their minds to have to deal with. I hated that I had to kind of help navigate parents through that issue. But in a nutshell, our foods come from the earth, right? And our soil has minerals, it has heavy metals because the Earth's crust is made of things like arsenic, and so if we grow things in the ground, that will soak up some of that as well. So to put it simply, so rice cereal in general, as compared to some other foods, like say baby oatmeal, does have higher amounts of heavy metals such as arsenic. And why this is of concern is, like I mentioned earlier, if we're serving rice cereal multiple times a day, every single day, we're potentially concerned about those levels rising to an amount that might not be safe. So again, it's about just switching things up as much as you can. If you've introduced your baby to rice cereal already, not to worry. Just try to maybe introduce some other things like the oatmeal, which I think is great because both are WIC approved, both are right side by side on the shelves. I think in terms of accessibility, they're pretty even at this time. And price-wise, they're identical. So I don't think there's a barrier. It's just about that education piece and knowing, what might be a better alternative. Same things go for certain fruits and fruit juices. Those are going to be higher in the arsenic as well. So really, we don't ever want our infants to be given fruit juice per se. But for our toddlers and things like that, a lot of the kid-friendly snacks are rice-based. So just being more mindful, even for us as adults, I like to snack on rice cakes, and my significant other and we ate a lot of rice in the past, and so knowing that it's a cultural staple for many people. But just to try to kind of work other alternatives into the mix as well. When it comes to preparing rice for, say, an older child or an adult, if you double soak it, double rinse it, make sure you rinse it a bunch. Studies have shown that it can decrease the amounts of arsenic by, I want to say, over 50%. So there are ways in terms of food preparation you can kind of scoot around that issue.
Well, I think it just speaks to, as you said, providing a variety. If you stick to, okay, what do I want to eat the same food 7 days a week at every meal? No. Does my baby? Probably not either. And no real reason to, when we have so many options available for babies. So one thing, along the same lines, is I think that parents worry that they're going to do it wrong and get so fixated on the very specifics of this, do it in this order, and all those sort of things, that it can be difficult to just feed the baby what you're eating, or feed the baby a version of what you're eating that's safe for them for their developmental ages and stages. But I think taking the time to talk that through with parents makes them feel confident and reassured that they can figure all of this out. One thing that I see a lot of, and I would love your take on, is squeeze pouches. Food comes in squeeze pouches these days, where you can get all of your fruits and veggies in like a little to-go sort of applesauce like squeeze. From the standpoint of both development and nutrition, what's your take on these squeeze pouches that are readily available and sometimes used as an alternative to actually like introducing the foods?
Right. Convenience is king, right? Squeeze pouches definitely fill that void and that necessity of, we're always on the go, and parents have older children that have soccer games, what have you. So to be able to throw those in the diaper bag is so essential. So, no food is quote unquote labeled bad in my book. So I want to first and foremost start by saying that. But in terms of development, if you think about how the child does have a pouch, right, it's very forward here. I'm not a speech language pathologist, so I'll probably butcher the technical terms, but it's very similar in terms of mouth position to what it's like to take a bottle. And so developmentally, your child's not progressing any way, shape, or form, really. They're still having that suck swallow pattern. They're not reaching across midline. They're not really chewing. They're not, working the tongue, that tongue lateralization back and forth, so that we're really, really working those oral motor skills, which then allows your child as they get older to handle tougher textures like meat, like some of those more nutrient dense foods that aren't so starchy, that kind of just melt in your mouth, and etc. So from a developmental standpoint, they get a failing grade. From a convenience standpoint, they're amazing. I'd say they get kind of a C grade from a nutrition standpoint. There are so many brands out there, some of which are, good, better, best, perhaps, even though I don't like to label things as best. I always encourage caregivers to try to look at the ingredient list for their children's food, their infant's food, like you would your own food as an adult. Hopefully, I'm a proponent of label reading. As a registered dietitian, it comes with the job description. But watching out to make sure that does that pouch, is the first ingredient really kale, or is it apple juice or apple puree concentrate or something that's more sugar dense? Look at how much sugar it has per serving, things like that. Look at the amount of iron that's in the pouch. Again, iron, zinc, choline, all of those ingredients for brain development, development as a whole are so important. Your baby's going to get enough of the other stuff from your breast milk or formula. So that's probably my take on it. I think the biggest thing and the biggest revelation that I think we've had as healthcare professionals is that developmentally, they don't really push your child into new sites at all, new areas. So that's why so many people are trying to get their clients and patients away from it.
I think that, like you said, convenience is king, and they're super convenient, and they make you feel as a parent a little bit better. Well, my baby's getting some kale in addition to their applesauce. But I agree completely about the developmental and nutritional standpoint. I mean, if I was to have juice stop every day, like I could feel really healthy, or Jamba Juice or whatever, but it still is a lot of sugar. And, I could just eat vegetables and fruits and get, a healthier version of that, and then have the textural component that goes into it too. So I don't think they're the worst thing in the world, but I don't think that they should be our mainstay staple of how we get fruits and vegetables to our child. And we should be cognizant of how frequently we're giving them versus real, actual fruits, vegetables, meats, cheeses, dairy, all of those sorts of things.
Right. Another that kind of reminds me of a concept that I try to reassure parents on as well is, some families send their child to, or their infant to daycare, and daycare is not on board with baby-led weaning, or they don't, know the ins and outs of it. So they require pureed food or pouches or things like that. So that's fine. I think what some parents don't realize is, they take this very black or white, all or nothing approach. They think, if baby can't do baby-led weaning at daycare, then they can't do it at all, or their progress is just going to go down the drain. That's not true. If you can have an opportunity at dinner time or on the weekends to slowly work on some of these skills where, maybe baby doesn't get a pouch or a puree, maybe you do offer some steamed broccoli or, mango pits or slices or things like that, they're going to be able to work on that in a safe, comfortable home environment.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, is you don't have to be in one camp or the other. It's okay to kind of do some softer foods or some purees and also do baby-led weaning. Or it's okay if when your child is at daycare doesn't feel comfortable with that and you can't teach them that or get them to be comfortable with it. So you say, okay, at home, we'll do this. And then at daycare, it doesn't have to be so black and white, or so you have to do it one way or the other. And I think that's something that's helpful for parents to hear, is that there's plenty that you can do in between both and be doing a great job.
I agree, definitely.
Well, this has been such a great discussion. I think it's demystified a lot of the questions around baby-led weaning, because I think it's something where people hear about it and they feel like, gosh, I should do that, but it's so confusing, and I'm scared about the gagging and choking, which we discussed are normal. If parents are looking for more information, I will send them straight to your Instagram at the clinic dietitian and refer them to your website of the same name too. And I wish you the best of luck with PA school right now, because you
Thank
have a lot of
you.
hats that you wear, and it's great that you still continue to provide such great content from a dietitian standpoint while you're in the midst of a very busy school calendar.
Thank you so much. Yes, I never plan to lose my registered dietitian nutritionist credential. I'm very proud of my roots in nutrition and prevention and hope to keep that as I move forward in medicine as a physician assistant. So yes, I think if parents are interested in seeing more information, I try to do a lot with infographics and really boiling down information into pretty easy, digestible, haha, very punny type things. So on my Instagram, the clinic dietitian, spelled with a T, they can check out posts. I've done posts on differences between gagging and choking, how to prevent the choking hazards, how to navigate that. Also, what are important nutrients of concern, what are good easy foods to start with, what do we do when our baby gets to a picky stage in toddlerhood. I try to span the whole developmental continuum, if you will. So I appreciate people checking that out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.